Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez delivers again. Another masterful performance by a legend. And we further see why Chocolatito is a legend, why he was once on pound-for-pound list, and why he still belongs on pound-for-pound list to this very day. Dismantling Julio Cesar Martinez in pretty brutal, one-sided fashion. Before this fight, I was talking on Discord and things like that about how the odds were just far too close. Chocolatito came into this fight as a minus 140 favorite, whereas Martinez, you got almost half in value at a plus 120. The value on Martinez in betting was far too short, I think. I feel like he was being oversold to the public, and I think people were putting too much stock in the possibility of Roman Gonzalez aging overnight. Now, heading into this fight, my prediction was Chocolatito to knock him out in about 8 rounds, 7-8 rounds. I thought he would dismantle Martinez. Martinez may win a round or two, but in totality, I felt Chocolatito would just come in, break him down, stop him eventually. Martinez has a lot of weaknesses, specifically defensively. His biggest weakness, and one of the biggest reasons why I thought Chocolatito would just be able to run through him, was mainly because of the fact that he fights in such a squared-up stance. He is incredibly open to the counter straight right hand. He's open to most shots. He fights largely with his hands down. He doesn't usually fight out of a tight high guard, only sequentially. And the way he throws punches, which is typically around the waist or chest region, he tends to keep them low to try to loop punches and get them out of your peripheral vision. Chocolatito is someone who watches opponents' feet and waist. He understands the biomechanics of his opponent incredibly well, and he can fight with an opponent looking to trade with him in the pocket. He can trade with opponents in the pocket and make you miss and make you pay all night long. And he has no issues getting in exchanges, and he can come out virtually unscathed. And another thing that I think people were underestimating, and something that may be viewed as controversial, Roman Gonzalez has the best defense in all of boxing. You can call that controversial if you want. You can point out other good defensive fighters, Usyk, Bivol, Canelo. Certainly there are other guys with Ioka. Certainly a lot of other guys' names will be brought up. A lot of people will cite Chocolatito's knockout defeat against Rungvisai. But look at it like this. Most fighters do not fight at such a frenetic pace the way Chocolatito does. The guy throws thousands of punches per fight, even though his volume was lowered in this instance against Martinez. He will throw thousands, 1,200, up to 1,500 punches per fight. He'll land 400 to 500 punches, and his face will come out virtually unscathed. His face after the Juan Francisco Estrada fight, and he is someone who, in previous fights when his defense was a little bit more leaky, say when he was closer to his physical prime, when he fought guys like Takayama and Rungvisai and Quadras, and even even his fight to a certain extent against Israel Gonzalez, where he traveled down to Mexico, and, he did show a little bit of waning stamina in that fight, as he was in a region where elevation is certainly higher, and as a result, he's more prone to suffering more faults in his stamina and waning a bit quicker, and you could see him visibly pacing himself in that fight. He's hardly coming out of these fights really with any lacerations, with any swelling, nowadays specifically. And with how aggressive he is and how he doesn't really move out of the pocket at all. He's only taking half steps. He's only tilting his upper body one way and another. And he doesn't even really have to fight off of angles to be able to slip punches consistently and go several rounds without taking really any clean punches. Punches that'll really snap his head back against not even derisory offensive technicians. very skilled guys, very crafty and awkward fighters like Martinez, and very quick-handed fighters like Estrada with excellent footwork. There's not a lot of fighters who will be able to replicate that at all. And that's something that shouldn't be overlooked. Martinez was simply not in his class, and that's just the reality. Martinez's defense is too leaky. He had problems with Andrew Selby. He was getting beaten to the punch and even momentarily stunned, against Joel Cordova, who was a bit underrated coming into their fight and does have experience versus bigger men like even Mauricio Lara, but was simply not on Chocolatito's level, and he was even able to, stun and get to Martinez and beat him out in the pocket. He was dropped by McWilliams Arroyo. Chocolatito was simply on a different level, and I wasn't very worried for him in this fight. I felt in order for Martinez to win, you would likely have to see Chocolatito age overnight. Now, the reason why Roman Gonzalez has been able to sustain such incredible longevity in his career, fighting at world level from 2008 all the way up until now, is because he doesn't have a style, specifically with how he's aged and how he's developed as a fighter. He does not have a style where he relies largely on athleticism and physical gifts. He's someone who relies on his boxing brain and his ring IQ. His ability to slip punches, his ability to counter, anticipate punches coming back. He's not someone who relies like a Roy Jones or say even like a Pernell Whitaker. So he's not someone who relies on his quick twitch reflexes. Even in this fight against Martinez was the guy with the quicker hands. Estrada was the guy with the quicker hands. But Chocolatito's just natural boxing brain and his instincts and ability to anticipate punches and how he watches and reads and dissects fighters in his head. He doesn't need the hand speed and the foot speed that other more physically gifted fighters need. And he has the defense and the ability to slip punches and the ability to parry and versatility to not take punishment coming back and not come out of fights with significant visceral or internal damage, which can then affect him. And he's only 34 years old. Say, for example, fighters like Vasily Lomachenko and Terence Crawford, who are on pound-for-pound lists right now. Even Errol Spence. Spence is only 2 years younger than him, and guys like Loma and Crawford are only 2 years, or are actually the exact same age as Chocolatito, 34 years old. It may not seem like it, considering how long Chocolatito has fought, but, he hasn't had loads of punishing fights. I wouldn't consider the second Estrada fight to be too grueling and punishing for him. He didn't really take many significant punches. He wasn't really hurt in that fight. There were rounds where he was outworked, but not significantly hurt. Chocolatito had punishing fights, say against Carlos Cuadras and maybe Francisco Rosas and the Rungvisai fights, but otherwise, he's had mostly routine fights throughout his career. The first Estrada fight might have been relatively punishing, but he hasn't had, for a guy with 55 fights, I think, 54, he hasn't really had a super punishing career in terms of internal or visceral damage. And that's helped him to sustain the longevity he's possessed to this very day. And some people may laugh at this and scorn me for this, but I honestly think Chocolatito could go up until 37 and 38 years old as a world-class, possibly a leader, best fighter in the division type fighter. Because of those specific reasons, I think maybe at, say, 37, 38 years old, you'll start to see his punch resistance and stamina wane. But I think overall, Chocolatito is a well-preserved athlete. He doesn't take loads of punishment in fights nowadays, especially. And the way he started to dedicate and apply himself in his career nowadays, specifically more than ever, You know, around the time of Quadras and Rungvisai, his trainer, his longtime trainer from his first ever amateur fight, all the way until then, had died. Now he's gotten with Marcos Caballero, and he's rejuvenated. And he's training more consistently. He's not blowing up in weight like he used to. And he's probably a better fighter than he ever has been, skillfully. Maybe not physically, but skill for skill, he's as good as anybody in the sport. Arguably still the best pound-for-pound fighter if you want to talk about skills relative to weight. And I'm just glad to witness this. You know, definitely appreciate Chocolatito while he's still here, but I still think time is on his side. I would make him a favorite over Estrada in a trilogy, which apparently he states he is contractually binded to. And I think I'd favor him over Fernando Martinez. I'd favor him over Ioka, who may very well be on the slide himself. I mean, I'd make him a favorite over Jesse Rodriguez. And I'd probably make him a favorite over Srisaket Sorongvisai, who is showing signs of fading himself. So, I mean, what can I really say? Chocolatito is still the best 115-pounder in my opinion. I think if we're to examine one fighter for another, skill for skill, out of he, Usyk, Loma, Canelo, Crawford, who would definitely have to be up there, I think Chocolatito is probably still the best fighter in the world. So, thanks for watching. Have a good one.